Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood game master Zach Hall here with another dev update for my personal hack of Modifius's 2D20 for Stargate. Check out the rest of this playlist if this is the first video that's kind of you're coming across. Talk about goals for what I hope this game can be, the fact that I am not trying to get sued. This is for my personal use, and I'm talking about it here on my YouTube channel because I need stuff to talk about, but also there are other folks out there who enjoy creating hacks and writing stuff, and I think sometimes it can feel really intimidating. And I hope that by me kind of publicly talking about my process, not that I am an expert by any means, but maybe my thoughts can spark inspiration in other game designers. And also, I really love the 2D20 system. I think it's great, and I think it's perfect for what I'm trying to do with this Stargate hack. I talk about that more, I think, in the first video that I made for this dev diary. So yeah, that's why I'm doing it, and I hope I'm gonna keep doing it. This is for me. If you are enjoying these videos, let me know. Just, it's fun to know other people are enjoying these. So in this video, we're going to talk about two things that aren't really related, but ended up being a little related. So it probably seems weird to combine these two topics, but these are kind of the next two things that I've tackled over the past week or so. And they ended up being a little related, and I've gotten them to a state that I think I'm happy with, and so we can jump in, kind of talk about it. The first thing I want to talk about is threat and tone and tension, and how all three of those things work together in a game like this, where I am attempting to create a game that emulates a written TV show. And so luckily there are other games that do that I was able to kind of draw some inspiration. But yeah, these are my notes on what I'm kind of doing right now, at least, or how I think, this is gonna work. Some of this is kind of notes for myself, or like little like dev notes, and not necessarily like mechanics. But my goal with creating this subsystem is that first, like the actual mechanics of this subsystem of tension, what I'm calling the tension table. The purpose of this is for a GM to be able to adjust their starting pool of threat based on the mission that they have created. Either, I'm not going to talk about this as if it would ever be a product. So let's just talk about it. Whatever me, the GM, in terms of like prepping and writing a mission, I would assign that mission a tension level. And the goal of this system is kind of multifaceted. Mechanically, I want to be able to dictate or like be explicit in how I think threat should be scaled based on the tension of the mission. But also, like, through that and this subsystem, the amount of threat should be used to both communicate the tone and tension of the mission to the players. Improper grammar over here. So I want to use the starting pool of threat and the like declared tension level of the episode or the mission. I want that to be communicated to the players either like up front before a session or at the very, very beginning of a session, or as like this kind of reveal. I'm imagining almost like whenever the theme song would play after like the cold open, that would be where I would kind of like reveal the tension for the mission. I kind of have to play with that a little bit because I think depending on if I really mechanize that like explicitly, or if that's how I end up doing it, I might have to write in some ways to allow PCs or just players themselves to be able to like retroactively adjust equipment, because the last thing that this tension subsystem does, it unlocks certain options. Like right now, it's just equipment. So which tells you the two things I'm covering. I'm covering this tension subsystem and the very, very beginning, the basics of equipment in this game. So I wrote a little kind of side blurb here. I will admit that this is inspired by what I saw I'm drawing a blank on the publishing studio now, but the developers who created the D20 based Stargate RPG that came out 3 or 4 years ago before the Amazon acquisition of MGM and they lost the license. That game itself had this tension mechanic. The mechanic behind it was very different because it's obviously a very different system, base level that's running it. But they also had this little call out that I inspired me to kind of write my own about violence and in Stargate, at least, and the narrative role that it plays. So, and I won't read this out loud to you, it's on the screen, but basically, I think by default, Stargate is not a setting or a game that the PCs should be fearing of life and death in every scenario. Is that realistic? But is realism one of the goals of my game? No. If we scroll all the way up to the top, here's our vision statement. Stargate game tells a cinematic science fiction story of highly competent, heroic explorers voluntarily facing the unknown. There's nothing here about realism. There's nothing here about tactics. There's nothing here about verisimilitude, right? I'm trying to tell a cinematic science fiction story about highly competent, heroic explorers. So when it comes to violence and the threat of death in this game, the default is that combat is non-lethal. PCs and the players kind of know, like, the tension of life and death is not a central narrative point in Stargate. You can call that plot armor, whatever you want to call it. It's just not a ding by default. And we can see that mechanically in the tension table where we have levels of tension, the starting threat pool that the GM will start with, and then this, I mean, I don't have a great header for this right now. It's just called combat. This is just a description of the role combat plays narratively in that episode / mission based on the tension level. So you can see low, like we have a standard, we have one step below that, low tension, we have then can ramp it up 3 times past standard all the way up to full alert, which is a direct reference to a episode, I believe in season 8 of Stargate SG-1. Trying to write these little bits and bobs for myself. While also, when we get to equipment, I'm also filing the serial numbers off in order to protect myself a little bit, since I am posting and talking about this online. I'm sure MGM and Amazon don't give a shit, but I'm just a scared little guy. You can see low tension, 1 threat per player. The baseline in 220 is 2 threat per player, so that's where we kind of start with standard and then we ramp up from there. If you can see in a low tension episode, there is little tension present. PCs feel safe with little caution. Roleplay relationship development. These are, I mean, I hesitate to call them filler episodes because there's a negative connotation to filler. There's good filler and there's bad filler. And obviously, as a GM, I never plan on there being bad filler episodes. But really, all we can do as GMs is create the opportunity, like create fillers or, for instance, low tension episodes and missions and hand it over to our players to then turn it into a good filler episode. You know what I mean? And there's plenty of low tension episodes in Stargate that they still have narrative consequences. Like, they're usually very self-contained. Like, the status quo does not change in these missions, these episodes. You know, maybe you're exploring a planet that turns out to be extremely, like, potentially, like, I mean, what we would consider maybe not prehistoric, because obviously that would be like pre-civilization, like hunter-gatherer level. Your SG team with P90s and pistols are not threatened in any way, not really. Or like even what combat tension there might be is kind of comedic. Like, it's the SG team would overpower them so much, even if violence is kind of threatened, it's comedic because of how far outmatched the enemy is. So that's kind of what I mean by low. And everybody has different goals for like the type of game that they want to run, right? Like I don't necessarily I think I would run a ton of low missions? No. But I think after like some urgent or grim missions, maybe the players just need a break. They want to do something. Part of the reason why I wanted to mechanize something like tension and tone is to create a shared language base for the players and the GMs to have like conversations about desires so that the players can go to the GM and say, "Hey, we've been stressed for weeks now back to back. Would you be open to like writing us a low tension? It doesn't have to be a mission that would last more than a session. Can we just get like one session with like low stakes?" Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of my goal here. You see like combat's not even mentioned in low tension episodes. At standard, it's the typical amount of tension for a mission. Where combat is uncommon, attacks towards the PC are assumed to be non-lethal by default. You can even see even in the urgent where there's clear and present danger and combat is possible if things go poorly. Combat towards the PCs is still non-lethal by default. So we've got 3 out of 5 tension levels. Combat is assumed to be non-lethal. And that's mainly towards the PCs. Like now PCs, as you'll see, like a lot of what they do can be non-lethal and can be assumed, like certain level of assumptions can be made if you want to. But towards the PCs, low, standard, and urgent, if combat breaks out, there is violence towards the PCs. The players at a meta level know that unless the GM, me, says they are trying to kill you, it is any violence coming at them is going to be non-lethal. With the assumption being that the PCs are not trying to engage in violence in order to not die. The PCs are engaging in violence in order to not be captured, in order to not have their gear stolen, in order to not be delayed in a time sensitive matter that they're trying to accomplish. Then have Grim, where the opponents are aggressive. They're not just, hostile. They don't just have a hostile attitude. They are actually aggressive in their violence towards the PCs. The PCs are in real danger of harm, and attacks on the PCs are assumed to be lethal with a chance of PC death. So Grim, I'm trying to think. I tried to think of episodes, but I mean, honestly, in SG1, there isn't really a good example, or Atlantis, though I'm kind of drawing a blank on Atlantis. It's been a long time since I watched Atlantis, so I'm doing a rewatch right now. It's tough. Like I can't pull one off the top of my head where it was obvious during a mission that the stakes were really high and that someone could die, and someone did die. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank. Maybe, you know what? There's a episode in season 6 after O'Neill has to be temporarily joined with a Tok'ra symbiote, where he ends up captured by Ball, I think. No, one of those system lords. I can't remember his name. They all kind of run together. I guess spoilers. Daniel appears to him. This is the season where Daniel is ascended, and Daniel appears to him and is trying to like get Jack out, and like even offers trying to get Jack to ascend so that he can get out. That episode might be grim. Like a PC was like in this. If we tried to move that into a TTRPG setting, a player being captured, tortured for information, with the knowledge that if they did not get out, they would die. That's probably grim tension. There's a chance of PC death. If things don't go the right way, in this instance, the rest of the party isn't coming up with plans and rolling decently well and managing their momentum and creating advantages for themselves to get into a good spot to be able to break that PC out. Then we have full alert. This is like world type situations. These are, couple season finales. The Battle of Antarctica, I'd probably put as full alert, even though even then, a lot of plot armor in that episode. You could, if you the GM, me the GM, could say beforehand, this is grim versus this is full alert, this is urgent. That's the perk of creating this kind of mechanic subsystem, is that The players kind of know what to expect. Things can change episode to episode. Now, like, just still have a session 0 and use the tension table to communicate how tense is the campaign this season going to be. Or, if we plan on, if you want to write a 6-8 mission story arc that runs 14 to 20 episodes or sessions, then 12 of them are going to be standard, or 12 of them are going to be urgent, or 12 of them are going to be low. Like, you could easily use this to have pre-season session 0 conversations about the type of game that you want to run. So that's my threat, tone, and tension system. I really like it. I don't think this really needs to be changed, other than potentially like calling out any additional things that are unlocked through the tension table, but I just don't think they will be, or that's necessary. But yeah, I really like where I landed here. It took me a little while to kind of put my thoughts together and figure out what I thought made the most sense and matched my goals for the game. This is it. Tone, threat, and tension. The next thing I wanted to show is the very beginning of my thoughts around equipment. Luckily, the 2D20 system, like, the default setting that they kind of created weapons for was like modern day, like modern stuff. So they already had things like submachine gun and pistol and armor statted out. I just had to copy and paste those into I had spent a lot of time trying to replicate a Zatnikitel or a Zat gun from Stargate. Filed the serial numbers off and called it a Zap gun here, just for reasons. But if you don't really know how combat works in 2D20, there are videos, and I can make a separate video about it. I don't want to dive into explain the entire combat system. A goal, I like kind of writing my goals out ahead of time, so I can write general thoughts down without solutioning, and then I can always check back in to see if my solutions are actually meeting my goals. I wanted to create kits of assumed access to equipment with the ability for a PC to change kits at the beginning of a mission. Now, I don't think I'm there yet as far as kits, if I'm being completely honest. I have a soldier kit and an academic kit, but there's a lot of like pick one from a list. There isn't a lot of separation between, and so I don't know if I really want to like. I'm not entirely sure if this is where I want to be in terms of what it is we do. But you can see that you kind of, a soldier gets access to a P90 or a Zap gun. They also get access to an M9, which is like, they can choose between combat body armor or a tactical vest. Body armor gives them additional resistance, but is uncomfortable. You can then pick one or below. These are straight from 2D20's SRD, which, are in all the channel description or the video descriptions. So you can go and grab it. I'm not going to go into details here. You can just kind of, in general, most of these don't necessarily do a mechanic. They basically unlock narrative options, or are just understood. They're basically function as traits that allow you to attempt something you wouldn't normally be able to complete without it, or makes a task, reduces the difficulty by the fact that you have it. And then all this extra stuff, which again, no mechanics, just listed out narratively. So in instances, and I can imagine in a high tension episode where a GM might want to be more strict with, what did you bring with you? Do you have do you have it like where you can track equipment? But this is not, by default, not the game that you should be tracking equipment. And you really shouldn't even really be penalized in, 70% of sessions or episodes based on the weapon you picked or the armor that you picked, because it's not going to come up. It's a TTRPG. You have to stat things out, but at the same time, I don't want equipment to become something you have to spend a lot of time on, which is why there's 3 guns or 3 weapons listed. I didn't even do a Jaffa staff weapon, because it'll do what it does. It'll probably be close to I might give it almost like a shotgun, but wouldn't do like an area since it is like single target. It might be inaccurate. So P90, it's inaccurate. It is close. It does 3 challenge dice worth of damage, which means the challenge dice have it's a d6. A 1 is a 1. 1 does 1 damage. 2 means 2 damage. 3 and 4 are 0, and then 5 and 6 are 1 plus an effect. And the effects are used for special effects, status conditions, stuff like that, which we'll see in a second. Burst, I don't know if I really care enough about ammunition in this game to actually worry about things like burst, but it's there by default, so I left it in. But burst might be something that I just do away with because I don't want folks to be like thinking about ammunition. But again, this is one of those things where like tension level can come into play. So maybe you don't have to worry about ammunition until you get to the grim level. Maybe. I don't know. Or it's not, or maybe it just isn't a worry until there's a complication, you know? Like that's the kind of thing I could see complications coming up. You just rolled a complication. You reach down, you realize you've got 2 more mags left for your P90. Well, then now we're at least thinking about potentially running out of ammo on this mission. It's 2-handed, but it's a minor thing, so it's not something that's take up a lot of time or doesn't take up a lot of space on your person or in your like inventory. It is inaccurate, and if you watched, it is inaccurate. There's a tension column here because I do plan on if I add things like sniper rifles, rocket launchers, that kind of stuff, those things not being unlocked for PCs unless a episode is at a certain tension level. I'm imagining like probably. Maybe I could see a sniper rifle maybe being unlocked at, or whatever I called it, the level 3. Zap gun though, I did have to, I went back and forth on this a ton. I was trying to do something special. Like I didn't think that anything in the system really did what I wanted it to do until I read up a little bit more on fatigue and the drain property. And that's when I realized, oh, this will just do it. So in 2D20, you have stress. Stress are basically boxes that you fill up. And when you max out on your stress, or you would like to not have to fill up stress boxes, you can take things called harm or wounds, which are kind of like short to or long-term injuries that you kind of take with you for a certain amount of time. But the trade-off of like taking a wound is that you take that wound, but you don't have to fill up your stress boxes. For PCs, that means that they can obviously, like, in addition to the like meta plot armor of the tension levels, they're also just much harder to put down than your whatever, like you're just insignificant NPC, right? Insignificant NPCs basically have like 0 stress, won't take any harm, right? Or maybe they have 1 stress, maybe 2 stress. Here's what I did for the zap gun. The default rule for fatigue or on a drain weapon is that when you roll a challenge dice for every effect, that's the kind of bang exclamation point system here in brackets. That's an effect. You get those on a 5 or 6 on a D6. So for every effect rolled, you add 1 fatigue. And fatigue, essentially what it does is instead of filling in a stress box, it reduces the maximum stress of that target. Then if that target stress becomes 0, they become unconscious. Now, that's not anything I wrote. That's just the 2D20. Now, I gave the zap gun a lot of damage dice in order to roll a ton, give the characters the best chance of rolling dice while still making the effects of the zap gun, while it really is basically used as a narrative device in Stargate. I wanted to try to like put it into the mechanics of the system, as opposed to it being a like shoot once you're stunned, shoot twice they're dead, shoot 3 times you disintegrate the body. I think this is going to accomplish that. Like this is going to accomplish that, but there's actual mechanics behind it that match the rest of the weapons. If stress becomes zero, if target stress becomes zero, the target becomes unconscious. Unconscious means they are defeated. They're immediately taken out of combat. And it's GM discretion when NPCs become unconscious. Are they just dead or are they alive? And that depends, like it's GM fiat, but also tension level where there's assumed lethality, right? So that's why I call it here, if this is more of a dev note. If the target of the attack was an incidental NPC, which is a thing, it's not just me throwing an adjective in front of an NPC. There's a stat block format for incidental NPCs. Feel free to skip the damage step and declare the target unconscious. This is me just being like, listen, like if an incidental NPC by default has 0 stress and the zap gun hits, don't make the player take the time to roll 4d6 because there's a chance they're not going to get any effects. And it just slows things down. So if it's an incidental NPC, they're just automatically unconscious. Now, there's always the chance that even on 4d6, and maybe you only need 1 or 2 effects, decent chance that you've got a 33% chance on each dice. You need 50% of your dice. In effect, I don't know what that means. As far as like the stats, I'm not a good math guy at that, or I'm a decent math guy. I'm not a good statistician. So mechanically, this is a bit of a nerf based on the narrative. A zap gun basically always stuns in the first shot. But then we have our additional shots. I format it this way. I think in the show they basically say first shot stuns, second shot kills, third shot disintegrates. Here it's the first shot, and then we have additional shots. It still does four challenge dice drain, just like the first shot. But if you shoot the same target more than once, the zap gun loses its non-lethal property because you are if you were intentionally shooting somebody a second time, your intention 9 times out of 10 is not to just incapacitate them, and there's enough time for them to know like, oh, and so it loses the non-lethal property. It gains the lethal property and the escalation properties. Escalation property means just the fact that this would be true for like if you opted into taking a assault rifle, rocket launcher, blah blah blah. There's just the fact that like people would see you and they would know that there's a level of violence that's kind of being assumed, where like, so a weapon with an escalation property means that like you're putting people on edge potentially negatively just by you carrying the weapon. So if someone sees you zap and kill somebody with a second shot after they were unconscious the first time, you are escalating the situation, right? So that's kind of what I'm attempting to accomplish there. I'm gonna hear some like dev notes. If you see something in parentheses, that is the chapter and then the page inside that chapter, because of the way that the 2D20 SRD is formatted, is broken up into like multiple documents per chapter instead of like one unified thing. So here's some notes. If it's missing if it doesn't have a paragraph or like essentially a footnote, it's a dev note from me to myself and to you, the viewer. This is a reminder that any fatigue gained while unconscious results in death. So that's how we are accomplishing the second shot equals dead. Again, not something I had to come up with. This is just the base 2D20 levels. We're assuming that the first shot makes the target unconscious. So then if you shoot an unconscious target, as long as you hit them, and remember, you should only be asking for a roll if there's no chance, or if there's a chance it could go wrong. So any fatigue gained while unconscious results in death. Auto death. You don't have to roll damage. Or I guess you would need to roll damage because a fatigue only hits if you rolled a thing. So like it's a little, I'm trying to make it work in the mechanics. I think it gets really, really close. But there are there's always the opportunity for incredibly shitty rolls. But then you've also got momentum spend to be able to re-roll challenge dice. This is also, it is even less likely because if an NPC would suffer any harm from this attack, the GM should rule them dead. So this any fatigue bit applies to both NPCs and PCs. But in terms of one of our PCs attacking an NPC, harm is like a word for basically like any kind of damage done, whether it's a stress box or a taking a wound. NPCs, they have a pretty low, they've got low stress boxes for the most part. Basically what I'm saying here is that whether it's the second shot, third shot, whatever, at this point, the intention is for it, or it seems like there's the possibility that the target could die. So if an NPC would suffer any harm, that means take any box of stress or any wound, the GM should rule them dead. So basically, the only way for someone, an NPC target, to not die from a additional shot of the zap gun is if the player rolled a 3 or a 4 on all 4 dice, because the other 4 faces of the die all have at least 1 damage, which would create stress, which would be a harm, which would rule them dead. And then this is a narrative thing that matches the lore of the show. If a corpse is shot with a zap gun, it is disintegrated. By kind of just filing this under additional shots and not listing out second, third shot like they do in the show, I'm not painting the rules into a weird, if you're shooting something that's dead, the corpse will be disintegrated. And when I would run that, if you're shooting a corpse, I'm not even going to make you roll for it. Like, it's obviously a narrative decision that you're making. Then this is all just out of the SRD armor. Armor just works as damage or stress resistance. It can be reduced to 0. These are qualities. I don't remember what ablative does. Uncomfortable, I think, just means that like you can't sleep in it. Like, you'd have to take it off and then put it back on. Hidden comes from like stealth, or like people perceiving that you're wearing armor, which might cause you problems if you're entering into an area where you're not supposed to be wearing armor, or you don't want people to know that you're wearing armor for optic. Then we have the soldier and armor kit. These are the things I think I want to spend more time on, check them out more. But I'm not satisfied, because I envision kits being like there being more kits. But at the same time, I don't know if it makes sense to create a different kit than there is to make one for like a scientist carrying a computer. I don't know, like analytical tools as listed here, when the only difference would be that one has a computer and one has a medic's bag. So I wonder if just having a soldier and a non-soldier kit, where the limitation is like only the soldiers can carry rifles, like anything beyond a pistol, and they have access to combat body armor, where usually the academics don't. I would say maybe an academic does get access to combat body armor if they are knowingly going on a mission, higher tension rating, like Grim. But yeah, so that's where I'm at. I didn't mean to take this long to talk about it. It's kind of fresh in my mind. I basically got to a place where I was comfortable making this video. So it's fresh on my mind. I probably over-explained some of it, but the point of these are to explain my thought process. So hopefully it's useful. That's where I'm at. I'm not entirely sure what I will end up tackling next. I'm really happy with threat stuff. I think what I will probably spend the next week A, binging more Stargate, and B, doing just more general reading of the 2D20. And so it might be that the next video I make might be a general 2D20 tutorial video, as opposed to a dev diary. I need to make things like talents and stuff like that. But kind of see what I need. Talents might be the last thing that I need to like actually be able to run a play test or something. So having some basic stats for weapons and armor and knowing threat usage, and then like that's kind of it. You could run, right now you could run a Stargate hack of the 2D20, I think talents is probably the last thing that you need. So maybe that'll be where I try to start tackling next. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy these. If you're interested in this hack and would like to be able to play it in some way, let me know in the comments and I can absolutely do an even more filed off, serial numbers filed off version that has no trademarks attached to it, and we all just know what it is. If you have any suggestions for an alternative name than Stargate that we could all just use as a code word, that would be awesome too. And if you ever just want to talk to Stargate, if you are a Stargate creator and just want another nerd to talk about it, hey, hit me up. You can reach me on threads at Zach Hall NC. I'm also on TikTok at Zach Hall _. And I'm really enjoying doing this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.